Uh, so, Good evening, everyone. I am Shomudra Laik on behalf of Team Voyages. And if you've been following our journey for long, you would know that it's after a while that we are doing one of these online sessions again. If you're new here, then please share, subscribe, do all of those things on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where we are present. So, we, uh, Again, without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed speaker for the day. So, Dr. Madhura Damle, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Presidency University. Uh, After finishing her undergraduate studies from Ruia College, University of Mumbai, Dr. Damle joined the Center for Political Studies School of Social Sciences, JNU, New Delhi, where she completed her MA, M.Phil, and Ph.D. She then joined Presidency University, Kolkata in December 2013. Her primary research interest is in politics of language, culture, and identity. She has also worked on intellectual history and caste politics. She translated Jotirao Phule's poetry from Marathi into English and plans to continue working on the writings of Phule and other prominent leaders of the non-Brahmin movement. At present, she is working on the ideas of purity, civility, and obscenity in socio-religious and linguistic spheres. She'll be speaking to us today on the non-Brahmin movement, modernity, and time travel. Now, without further ado, I would pass on the stage to her. Thank you. The stage
Thank
is
you,
yours, ma'am.
Shamudro. Yeah, thank you, Shamudro, and thank you, organizers of this event, for giving me an opportunity to interact with the wider audience. I think I haven't really spoken to students from other universities in a while, so thank you very much. As Shamudra said, today I will be speaking on the non-Brahmin movement, modernity, and time travel. So I will be today speaking about a novel written by Mukund Rao Patil, who was one of the eminent leaders in non-Brahmin movement in Western India. So this particular novel was serialized in a periodical called as Dinamitra from 1913 to 1915, as many of the novels at that time were serialized, right? And so it was published as a book a little later, I think in 1927. Uh, the title of the novel is Dadda Shastri Paranne, who is the protagonist of this novel. So Dadda Shastri means the person who is dumb or foolish or idiot, and Paranne can be translated as something like parasite, because the one who lives on the food given by others. Uh, so this Dadda Shastri Paranne is a priest. Subtitle of the novel is, it can be translated into English as The Return of the Priest to the Mortal World from the Paradise. The novel was originally written in Marathi, and maybe that is the reason why it is little known, uh, even in, but it's not very well known even in Maharashtra or Western India. So I will be talking particularly about this novel, and I will pick up some important points from this novel and talk about non-Brahmin movement, Brahminism, modernity, and the motif of time travel which is used in this novel. So this particular priest, who is the protagonist of the novel, is a very pious Brahmin who lives in pre-colonial period. So 100 years before the novel is written, that is the time period of this protagonist. So if we assume that the time is 1813 or 1815, or a time around that, British rule has not yet established in Western India, or what was called as Bombay Presidency during colonial period. So the this priest only knows about the British, but he knows them as Kalkattekar, which means the rulers of Kolkata. But he hasn't really interacted with them. So this particular priest is very pious, very devout, and so at the time of his death, he receives a boon that he would be able to revisit his hometown 100 years after his death. So he's sent to heaven after his death, uh, and 100 years after that, that is around 1913, he reappears on the earth in his favorite city, in his hometown, that is the city of Pune. The Brahmin, who has witnessed Peshwa rule during his entire lifetime, now encounters with the colonial rule and society, modern society, uh, which leaves him perplexed. He is not able to comprehend modern institutions, modern practices, modern thought, and so on. So, this is a very satirical, humorous novel which talks about displaced and how he looks at this modern colonial society. Uh, Before talking about the novel and before coming to the particulars of it, I would first like to talk about the terms that I have used in the title of this talk. So first I will talk a little about the concept of modernity and modernity in India. Then I will talk about non-Brahmin movement in Western India in the context of colonial modernity, and then I will come back to this novel. So I have been reading this novel for last 5, 6, 7 years and fascinated by it. So I'm just trying to share a few insights from my reading of this novel. So first, let us talk about modernity. I suppose that many of you are students of history, and so you must have studied about modernity, Enlightenment, Europe, etc., etc. But still, we will have a quick revision. Uh, so here, when we are talking about modernity, we are talking about a set of ideas, practices, and institutions that emerged in Europe in Enlightenment period. So, what was this modernity? What was these modern ideas and institutions? One of the foremost ideas of modernity was reason or rationality. It was believed that the capacity or this faculty of reason is there in each and every individual and it's universal. So your reason or your rational ability is not different from mine because I am also a human being. So, a strong belief in reason or rationality, as well as a belief in universality of the reason, was one of the most crucial, or let's say, most important feature of Enlightenment modernity. Empiricism was another feature or another important idea in modernity. It means the belief that the only valid source of knowledge is the knowledge which is collected through sense perception. So, not intuition. So, it's or not through authority of scriptures. So, only valid knowledge or only valid source of knowledge is sense perception. The things that you can see, observe, and conduct experiments on. Universalism, I have already talked about when I was talking about reason, but apart from universality of reason, universalism in general was also an important feature of Enlightenment modernity. The belief that everybody is same, all human beings have something in common because they are human beings. So, universality of reason, but also universality of science. So, science can be applied everywhere in the world, which leads us to next feature of Enlightenment modernity, that is belief in science and technology. So science becomes very important part of ideas on modernity. The belief uh, that science can help human being in revealing or understanding rules or laws of nature, and by using those laws or by application of those laws, human being can control nature. So romanticism that comes or that emerges as a reply or response to modernity uh, makes a counter argument to this. It says that no, everything in the nature cannot be controlled, but That is a different issue. So coming back to modernity, we can say that belief in science and technology and its ability to understand and thereby control nature was also another important feature of modernity. Another important idea that was part of modernity was progress. So, the belief that we as humankind are always going to progress, are always going to move forward. So, there are multiple notions of progress. In India, for example, you must be familiar with the circular notion of development or progress. That is, there is Satya Yug, then Treta Yug, then Dwapar Yug, and Kali Yug, and after Kali Yug there is again Satya Yug. So there is a circular motion here, as opposed to circular or spiral. In enlightenment modernity, there is a notion of linear progress, that societies travel through a line. They will always move forward. There will always be a progress. Another important idea which was part of enlightenment modernity was individualism. So importance to individual freedom, which also means in economic and political sphere emergence of liberalism, liberal economy, and which also leads to capitalist economic order. Another aspect of individualism and individual freedom was also toleration. So toleration towards sects or religions which are different from your own also emerges during this period, which leads us to next feature of enlightenment modernity, and that is secularism. Here by secularism we mean separation between church and the state. You all know about reformation movement. So with reformation movement and emergence of protestantism, etc., the idea of separation between religious and political sphere also emerges. And this separation of political from religious, and which is also called as secularism, is was also an important feature of modernity. Nation state, the institution of nation state also emerged during modern period. So I'm not going into details for like further details, but to summarize quickly, we are saying that enlightenment modernity was characterized by ideas like rationality or reason, empiricism, universalism, progress, belief in science and technology, individualism, liberty, toleration, secularism, emergence of nation state, emergence of liberal capitalist uh, economic political order, and so on. Now, this is the general understanding or general introduction to the concept of modernity that we are talking about. What happens in India during colonial rule is that with the advent of colonial regime or with the advent of colonial rule, there also comes these ideas, practices, and institutions associated with Western or let's say European modernity. Now we are using the term colonial modernity. It doesn't mean that modernity which has come during colonial period or modernity which has come to India as a result of colonial rule. It is both of these, but much more. So, what happens to India during the colonial rule is not just a new political regime, but with it, there is also an encounter with European philosophy, European sciences, or knowledge systems in general, and all these ideas associated with modernity that I just talked about. However, since it is the colonial masters, since it is through the institutions of colonial state that many of the people encounter with these ideas, it also means that the modernity comes with a baggage, that it is something like that should be welcomed by the Indian people because it is promising a better future, but it is also coming from the colonial masters. And so there is a lot of hesitation to embrace modernity. Uh, a few decades or even few centuries before colonial rule, Christian missionaries had already started coming to India, and they had established missions throughout India, first on the western coast and eastern coast, and then in many other places in India. Christian missionaries establish their missions and start working. They open schools, they learn languages and print grammars, and later on translations of Bible and so on. Uh, so another way through which people start introspecting about their own religion, traditions, customs was also through missionary critique. So on one hand, there is this missionary critique. Uh, at the same time, there are new colonial institutions, especially educational institutions, that are coming up through these, and generally through relations with colonizers. Indians come in contact with a totally different culture, knowledge systems, institutions, new religions, and so on. As a result of this encounter, there is a lot of uh, awakening and shaking up and a storm kind of thing in India, which is also described as Renaissance by some people. So, this is the period of tremendous social, political, economic, cultural change in India. Just think of a range of this change. Lots of new things are coming. Railways, for example, telegram, printing press. So, lots of new technologies are not just arriving in India, but transforming its society in a significant way. Not just like big things like railways or telegrams or press, which had tremendous impact, but even small things which were uh, manufactured by new technology were imported to India. Knife, safety pin, pens, scissors, bangles, uh, mirrors, or biscuits and tea, or new public or political institutions, including political associations, uh, things like restaurants, new kind of clothes. So think about any aspect or walk of life, and you will find out that new things are coming. These are things which are not just different but also modern. And by modern, we mean lots of things that we were talking about before this. Uh, as a result of this encounter with modern institutions, practices, and ideas, many Indians started introspecting, started thinking about their past, their present, and their future. Many of them started self critique of their languages, critique of their religion, critique of their social practices and customs, critique of their traditions, and so on. There was a hope in modernity, or there is implicitly the hope in the very concept of modernity, that with the advent of modernity, traditional institutions, traditional beliefs, traditional structures will decline or go away or will be destroyed. So lots of Indian thinkers, Ambedkar for example, or Nehru for that matter, embrace modernity or welcome modernity with a hope that it will lead to the destruction of inegalitarian, exploitative, traditional structures like caste system. But that did not really happen. The advent of modernity did not necessarily lead to destruction or decline of traditional practices, norms, or structures. People tried to find out ways to negotiate with this modernity. Modernity was promising a better future. It was promising material progress. So people wanted to welcome it on one hand, but they did not want to leave the traditional privileges or interests protected in traditional structures. And so modernity and tradition negotiated with each other in multiple ways. Let me give you a couple of examples. So there was a belief that the ink which is used in printing press consists of animal fat. So you know that according to Brahminical norms, animal fat was considered as defiling. And so lots of Brahmins or Brahminical households were very reluctant. Like by Brahminical, I don't just mean Brahmin, but even the non-Brahmin households which followed Brahminical practices. So we know that the concept of purity and pollution or defilement is at the core of caste system in India. You all know about controversy regarding a controversy in 1857. Yeah, so I was saying that there was a belief that the ink which is used for printing contains animal fat, and so people were reluctant to touch the printed books, thinking that they will defile them, they will defile their state of or like state of purity, because books at this time were still part of the sacred sphere. Books were mostly scriptures, and so printed scriptures were not touched. People were not ready to touch scriptures if they were printed, because there was a long tradition of manuscript texts. So, what some people did was they invented a technique of producing ink using ghee, because ghee had these very pure kind of connotations. Ghee in Hindu scriptural tradition was considered as a purifying agent, and so uh, ghee, like people produced or people tried to manufacture ink using ghee, and they advertised very like they printed various newspapers and books, especially scriptures, using this ghee ink. And in contemporary periodicals we see advertisements saying that this particular newspaper or this particular book is printed with ghee ink, and therefore uh, it will not be defiling, and you can use it while you are worshipping, etc., etc. So I'm trying to say that this is one example of how people used modern technologies like printing without really compromising with traditional norms, like norms of purity. Let me give another example. When railways were started, uh, people thought that it's a good way of reaching Banaras or Kashi in a shorter time, because a pilgrimage was considered as very important, and so visiting Kashi or visiting Banaras was considered as one of the ultimate aims of life, or you should be doing it at least once in your lifetime and things like that. So railways was considered as a boon, that without, in a short span of time and without much bodily efforts, you can actually visit a sacred place. Uh, so there is welcoming of modernity, there is welcoming of material progress, but it is not necessarily leading to end of tradition or end of traditional. In the first example, we saw that people used uh, inventions or new techniques to continue or sustain traditional structures uh, with welcoming of modern, or with like use of modern technology. In the second example, we can see that here modern technology is used to sustain traditions like pilgrimage. Or since we are talking about railway, there are letters to editors written in the contemporary newspaper which say that railways should be given more stops so that people can take ritualistic bath before they eat. So people would not eat without taking bath, and so they were not able to eat in the railways because they were defiled by because of travel in the railways. And so they were requesting the railways to give stops or halts to the railways so that people can get down, take bath on the railway stations or whatever, and then eat. uh, coming to the second point. So we first talked about modernity as it emerged in European context. Then I talked about the concept of colonial modernity and advent of all these modern ideas and institutions in India in the colonial context. Now I will talk a little about non-Brahmin movement in Western India, which was led by Jotirao Phule. So non-Brahmin movement emerges in this context, in the context of colonial modernity. Colonial modernity is advent, like it's already set out. It is arriving in India in multiple ways, and lots of things are going on. In 1873, Jotirao Phule establishes Satyashodhak Samaj, or Truth Seekers Society. With this emergence, or with this begins non-Brahmin movement in Western India, which is also called as Satyashodhak movement. Satyashodhak movement, uh, led by Phule, challenged the mediation of priests mediation between people and God. It subverted the Aryan invasion theory. I think in the last lecture in this series, uh, my colleague talked about the concept of Aryan and Aryan theory and its relation with the caste. So Phule was one of the eminent or one of the first thinkers or intellectuals who subverts the Aryan theory, that is, who uses the Aryan theory to talk about Brahminism and challenge caste system. Satyashodhak movement criticized Brahminism in three forms. They criticized role of Brahmins as priests. They criticize and not because, not only because they mediated between God and people, but also economic exploitation emerging out of it. So in this aspect, Satyashodhak movement or non-Brahmin movement goes very close to Protestant reforms. Satyashodhak movement also criticized Brahmins as school teachers and pointed out that in British educational institutions, which were supposed to give education to everyone, irrespective of caste and religion and gender, not so much gender, but yeah, to some extent also gender, because like most of the teachers in the initial period in these schools or other educational institutions were Brahmins. They were very reluctant to teach or impart knowledge to non-Brahmin students. So Satyashodhak movement criticized Brahmins and their roles as priests, their role as school teachers who were hesitant to teach to non-Brahmin students. Instead of teaching, they would give them work like sweeping the school or ask them to do their domestic works. Satyashodhak movement also criticized role of the Brahmins as administrators in the British it's like state institutions. Phule particularly believed that British colonial state was very just, it was egalitarian, but because of these administrators who were the Brahmins who had occupied the administrative position in colonial state, the grievances of the marginalized could not reach the British, and that's why he thought that British, where the colonial state was not able to, sorry, redress or resolve the problems of the non-Brahmins. Satyashodak movement also criticized Brahminical scriptures, which they believed played a role in sustaining the caste system and Brahminism. They ridiculed Brahminical deities. They criticized celebration of festivals because these festivals and rituals were used as the excuses by the Brahmins to exploit poor, marginalized people belonging to the lower caste. But there is also overlap of caste, class, and caste that they are talking about. Non-Brahmin movement or Satyashodak movement also talked about inferiorization of physical labor because of Brahminism. That is, because of Brahminism, physical labor is considered as inferior or less important. And Phule talks about how Brahmins enjoy the fruits of physical labor done by the others. He talks about leisure time that Brahmin men and women enjoy. Satyashodak movement also tried to establish alternative religious practices, alternative rituals that were more egalitarian and rational. So they had marriage ceremonies or wedding ceremonies in which groom and bridegroom exchanged some oaths or vows, and the Baratis or the people who used to be present at the weddings would just sing some songs to bless the couple. But the most importantly, there was no priest, not even non-Brahmin priest, and so bride and groom just promised each other that they will lead a life of an equality and freedom. Uh, Phule actually composed some verses to sing at these occasions. So Satyashodak and many of these features that we are talking about were also the features of self-respect movement or uh, Dravidian movement led by Periyar. Obviously, there are some differences, but ideologically, both these movements are quite close. Um, so this was just the background or the setting. Now let me come back to this novel that I wish to talk about. Uh, so this novel was written by Mukundrao Patil, who was a close associate or important leader in non-Brahmin movement. So his fathers, because he was adopted, so both his biological father as well as the person who had adopted him, both of them were very close associates of Jotirao Phule. And his adoptive father had started a particular periodical, Deen Mitra, which Mukundrao Patil continued to edit and publish for a long time. So it was through this periodical, as I said earlier, that this particular novel called Dadda Shastri Parani was serialized for almost 2 years. Uh, Now, this particular priest, as I already described the plot of this novel in like briefly earlier. So this priest or the protagonist of the novel argues with Lord Indra in the heavens that his family is very very pious, and so they will never leave the traditions. They will always live a traditional life, and because of this boon that he has got at the time of his death, he reminds Lord Indra that let me now go back to the earth. And so accordingly, he is sent to the city of Pune 100 years after his death. Now there is also significance of this city. Pune or Pune was the seat of Peshwa rulers. So it was the Peshwa rulers who ruled Western India before the British. Uh, the British defeated them in 1818, and establish their rule in western part of India. So Bombay was already with the British, or what is today called as Mumbai, but Pune uh, was conquered much later. So Pune was the seat, or let's say capital, of these Peshwa rulers. Now, who were these Peshwa rulers? They were Brahmins by caste. So they were actually the prime ministers of the ruler or the king, but they became so powerful that they became the de facto rulers. So since they were Brahmins, they were socially, religiously, culturally powerful already. Now they also gained political power, and very soon they also became very, very wealthy, or they also possessed economic power because they were also money lenders, they were also sardars, etc., etc. So during this regime, so it was not just a regime of Brahmins, or it was not just a coincidence that the rulers were Brahmins. This period is also identified as the height of Brahminism. So there were many caste norms and caste rules that were very strictly followed in this regime, and it was this regime that the British defeated and established their rule in Western India. So this protagonist of this novel is a sort of symbol of representative of these caste norms, traditions, or structures that were pre-colonial. And so he's very confident that he will remain like that. Not only him, but his entire family will remain like that, will remain devout, traditional, later on, like even after his death. However, when he comes to the city, when he comes to the earth, he finds out that his great grandson, or whoever is alive at that time in his family, is a reformer, is a social reformer. And so that is a big shock for him. But this priest is also fascinated by the modern technology and things that are modern. For example, he talks about identical coins. He describes that how coins in this modern period are superior and identical because they are machine made. The priest has never seen like so many machine made things in his life. So he talks about identical coins. He talks about various kinds of soaps. Like soaps is another thing that fascinates him. He gets to test biscuits. So he thinks that it is a new mishti that these Kolkata rulers or British have discovered, and he really likes them. He tests tea, he tests soda water, he visits a tea hotel, he looks at all these cycles and motor cars and all these modern vehicles, and again it's amazed by the modern technology. He repeatedly says that even in the heavens there are no vehicles like that. Even Indra doesn't have such a great cart. He hasn't even seen a horse cart or a tonga in his lifetime. So like all these vehicles amaze him. He talks about how like medicines and how modern medicines are very, very effective. He talks about soft and nice cloths and dhotis in modern times. So he is almost jealous of the modern man, and he says that I'm really jealous of this modern lifestyle and modern man, because lots of these luxuries which were earlier confined to a handful of rulers or really, really wealthy people, now many of these luxuries or fruit of, let's say, material progress are available to common people. Now even this term common people is to be taken with a pinch of salt, but that is a different issue. So, on one hand, as I said, he's amazed or fascinated by this material progress, new technology, superior things, identical machine made things which are fine, more tasty, more effective, and things like that. So there is a very interesting verse regarding cha or tea in this novel. So first he is reluctant to test tea because he doesn't know what kind of drink it is. But uh, someone from modern period introduces him this tea and says that it is a kind of religious drink, and there is also a hymn or a kind of mantra which is composed to venerate tea. And so this modern shastri or modern pandit uh, recites a mantra or some kind of shloka of describing tea, which is described in this novel as, so tea is described here as China Vasini, which means coming from China, Madhu Gandha, which means smell like with which has a sweet fragrance, Cup Saucer Bhushita, Biscuit Priya, Ushna Bashpa Dhvajadvara, and so on. So I don't need to read out the entire hymn or entire shloka, but you can imagine uh, how tea is so this modern pandit or modern shastri describes tea as a new religious drink to this priest from the past, and he readily accepts it because he loves having tea. But he also dislikes lots of things in modern period. uh, he is initially not able to understand what is a tea hotel, that people are sitting in a row on a bench and sipping something. So initially he thinks that it is some kind of ritual that they are doing. But then he understands that these are people belonging to various castes and they are sitting together and dining together. Then a person belonging to so-called lower caste enters this tea hotel, and it's talking to the hotel owner in a very friendly way. They touch each other and things like that. This person from so-called lower caste also recites Gayatri mantra. So there is a lot of loosening up of caste norms, especially norms about touch and norms regarding knowledge and education, which he doesn't like at all. He becomes furious when he sees that caste and gender norms are no more followed. For example, he doesn't like women using umbrella. He doesn't like people belonging to so-called lower caste availing horse carts or wearing good and clean clothes. And so he doesn't he is not able to tolerate all these things, and so he prays to Lord Indra to take him back to the heavens, etc., etc. So, though this novel uses the motif of time travel and appears to be a fantasy novel, as you can now understand, this novel is actually a stinging satire on Brahminical modernity. So, what is this Brahminical modernity that I'm talking about? By Brahminical modernity, I mean that uh, Brahmins, or let's say Brahminical society, welcomed or embraced modernity, but only some of its features, especially its material progress or its technology that was promising a better future for them. However, modernity was not just about new technology and identical coins and good soaps and biscuits. It was also the set of ideas that we talked about. It was about rationality, it was about freedom, liberty, equality, and so on. This was not accepted by the Brahminical society. So there was a hypocrisy regarding the acceptance of modernity by the Brahminical society. This novel in particular, but non-Brahmin movement in general, criticized this hypocritical nature of Brahminical modernity. That it's accepting certain things which were of their interests, but rejecting things that challenge the traditional caste and other social structures. Secondly, The Brahminical society did not like non Brahmins or Dalits or marginalized people in general, because women is another section when I'm talking about the marginalized. So it was still all right if Brahmin or higher caste men changed and accepted modern or new things. But whenever people belonging to the marginalized section, be it people belong to Dalit communities or women or non Brahmins in general, if they accepted or followed certain modern norms or technology or practices, then they were criticized. So, this novel, which seems to be a fantasy novel, it's quite humorous, it's full of satire, is actually talking about hypocrisy of Brahminical modernity, or let's say it is subverting this Brahminical modernity. I talked about this novel today, but because it is an interesting thing. I mean, it's a story, so it's interesting to hear about and read about. But I'm trying to say that it is not just this novel, but this thought was an important feature of ideology of non-Brahmin movement. And this is a little lesser discussed feature of non-Brahmin movement. We all know how Dalit movement or non-Brahmin movement challenged Brahminism, challenged caste system, challenged hierarchy, division of laborers, and so on. But the negotiations with modernity or their encounters with modernity is uh, little discussed or lesser discussed aspect. We all know that Ambedkar and Dalit movement in general welcome modernity. For example, modern dressing or English language, because it promised better future for the marginalized. But this is also one aspect that Dalit movement or non-Brahmin movement is dealing with. The Brahminical society dealing with modernity. And this is how they replied to this Brahminical modernity. Through this novel, the idea of Brahminical modernity was subverted, but otherwise also in the writings of Phule and other anti-caste intellectuals, this aspect, that is selective interpretation of modernity by Brahminical leaders, by Brahminical society, was criticized. Benedict Anderson, I'm sure many of you are familiar with his book and his theory of imagined community. So Anderson talks about this concept of homogeneous empty time in the emergence of nations in Europe, nation and nationalism in Europe. Anderson argues that uh, this concept played an important role. Uh, there was an idea or imagination that all the people belonging to that particular community are traveling through homogeneous empty time. So all the people are connected, or they can imagine themselves as part of one national community, because they believe that they all are traveling through this uh, homogeneous time, which is empty because they are filling it. Various political scientists like Parthu Chatterjee have criticized this concept of homogeneous empty time. I would like to link this non-Brahmin movement and its critique of modernity to this critique of homogeneous empty time. Uh, by talking about hypocrisy of Brahminical modernity, non-Brahmin movement is also in a way talking about heterogeneity of time, that people are traveling but not together. At the same time, people inhabit modernity, tradition, and negotiations between modernity and tradition. So it is a very, very heterogeneous time. The time is different for Brahmins and different for Dalits or non Brahmins, which leads us to think about the concept of nation and nationalism. And lots of scholars have talked about it, questioned about it. They have talked about how Ambedkar and Phule both have criticized the conception of nation and nationalism. Phule talks about, I mean, he criticizes nation and says that uh, a nation, like, it's fruitless to talk about national unity if the society is not united, and fragmented, or it's inegalitarian and fragmented into various castes. uh, so since the modernity means different for people belonging to different social and caste status, since encounters and negotiations are different, we can say that there was nothing like homogeneous empty time through which people of India were really traveling. And that I mean that and as I said, that leads us to the question of nation and caste and relationship between caste and nation. So at the end, I would just like to say that cultures or communities are not monolithic or homogeneous. They're always heterogeneous. There are some emergent trends, there are some hegemonic trends, there are some uh, counter hegemonic trends also. And any culture, any civilization, or any community is made up of these heterogeneous strands, or as I said, trends. And so, whenever we talk about a time period, or a culture, or a society, or a community, let us always remember uh, about its diversity and heterogeneity, which is inherent. And let's not talk about any of these concepts, whether it's modernity or any kind of community, in a homogeneous way. So that's all for today. Thank you, all the organizers, once again.
Uh, Thank you. Uh, I Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Uh, Thank you for that wonderful session. So we have asked our viewers on Facebook to type in any comments or questions that they have. So we will just look in and try to collect any questions that might have come. Thank you so very much for your talk. That was in equal parts entertaining and instructive. That was something that I really liked about it. Is the notions of satire and, yeah, coming into serious. I
Uh, so, ma'am, it seems that there are no questions from the floor. So, on part of Team Voyages into the Past, I would once again like to thank you for delivering the wonderful talk today. And to our audience, I would once again request you to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and follow our YouTube page. I think there is a comment that has come in that is visible on the screen. It's a question, sorry, not a comment. So, ma'am, if you might want to address that.
Is there any protestation on Brahminical modernity in recent times, as Ambedkar and today you noted? Is there any others? Uh, I can't really think about any protest, uh, especially regarding Brahminical modernity in particular. There are different aspects of it that are dealt with and criticized, but I don't think this particular aspect is like, or maybe I don't know whether there is any recent protest on Brahminical modernity in contemporary times. There is a lot of critique on this hypocrisy part that Phule also talked about. For example, there is Kancha Ilaya's recent work where he republishes Ambedkar, where Ambedkar talks about beef uh, and emergence of untouchability. So some aspects are dealt with by lots of contemporary thinkers, but I'm not really aware of any critique which talks about critique of Brahminical modernity in recent period.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll just. There seems to be another comment that has come in from Shujata Chakraborty. Yeah. Uh, uh,
Mm. Subaltern classes do not choose some elements of the institutional culture according to their own actual experience and needs. In this case, the modernity that was seen among the Brahmins, did the subaltern classes adopt any material? Uh, I couldn't really understand this question.
exactly. This is.
Uh,
It, it seems that the person asking the question misunderstood your point about Brahmins selectively adopting modernity, and
uh, point is that, yeah, even no, I mean, I don't really know what exactly is the question, but I can just explain what I meant maybe. Uh, that non-Brahmin movement is talking about this selective interpretation of modernity, which means that they're accepting or they're welcoming aspects of modernity that would sustain traditional structures like caste system, but did not let non-Brahmins embrace the modernity or did not allow the modernist ideas and practices that would lead to the destruction of caste norms, etc., etc. So that is, I think, the point that is the critique that this particular novel and non-Brahmin movement in general is making. It doesn't really matter whether non-Brahmins are selecting few aspects or it or not, because I mean that's not the point that we are talking about here.
thank you, ma'am. And I think there is another question from Deepak Sharma. So, if you could have that, yes.
Sure. Uh, this leeway through which Brahmanism escapes progress of all and maintains its privileges, is there any opposition to it, or does it go unnoticed? I think the entire talk was about this, so it was definitely not unnoticed. Non-Brahmin movement dealt with this or criticized it throughout. The novel is one example, but as I said, through other literature, through other works also, uh, this has been critiqued.
Thank you, ma'am. Those seem to be all the questions that we have received. So, finally, I guess I should wrap up uh, the proceedings for today. So, once again, on behalf of Team Voyages, I would like to thank you very much for agreeing to do this with us. It was a brilliantly enlightening talk for a lot of us because we do not usually get to hear much upon Western India or upon the non-Brahmin movement in general. So that was really wonderful. So once again, thank you very much, ma'am. And to our audience too, thank you for being patient with us and for supporting us for so long. If you already don't, please follow, like, subscribe, share as much as you can to get the word out so that we can keep growing from strength to strength. We are there on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. We also maintain some, or used to, I don't know whether we still do, certain groups on WhatsApp. So you could join those as well. So, once again, with that, I would like to conclude the live for today. Thank you, ma'am, once again. It was a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Shamudra. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. Thank you.